Hi there, I'm Doug Seserman and welcome to #Webinar Wednesday. This is our 55th webinar and today we have a special. And I'm privileged, of course, to serve as the CEO of Americans for Ben-Gurion University. It is noon Eastern time and I am sitting in my home office actually. I'm going to switch my virtual background to my virtual office here in New York City. How about that? Today, the topic is the Middle Eastern melting pot, how immigration has shaped Israel over time. And we have one of Israel's leading experts, Julia Mirsky, who's joined us today. We pulled her out of retirement for this special presentation. I'll give her bio in just a minute. We're really excited about this webinar. It's called for 30 minutes. And as you know, if you have questions, just click on the Q&A function, and I'll do my best to feed those questions to Professor Mirsky as we move through the program. But before we get started, I just want to thank the important people behind the scenes, Lenore, Ellie, and Leora in our office in New York. We are live on Facebook, and without their help, we just couldn't do what we do. Okay. So I think it's about time to get going. All right, so Professor Julia Mirsky is a professor emerita, which means that she's retired recently, very recently, at the Department of Social Work for BGU. She joined the department in 1998 after a long career as a senior clinical psychologist and consultant on immigration issues to public and governmental organizations. She also served as the head of the department, supervised many PhD and master's students throughout her career, and recently retired. I think you said October, just at the beginning of the year. Amazing. She has some interesting analysis, self-analysis on what it's like to be a retired professor. Maybe we'll get to that too. Her scientific work was focused on the psychological aspects of migration, and she has published several books and many academic papers on the topic. Professor Mirsky now heads the Center for Research and Education on Migrant Lives at BGU. Up to her retirement, she headed the Samuel and Miriam Hamburger Chair of Integration in Immigrant Communities. She has also led the international consortium of 6 Israeli higher education institutions and 5 European universities in a project funded by the European Council. This project developed and implemented experimental teaching methodologies in Israeli academia that focuses on the lives and experiences of migrants and refugees. The center aims to continue the activities of documentation, research, and education of professionals and communities about migrants' lives and experiences. Welcome, Professor Julia Mirsky. Webinar Wednesday.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
We're so pleased that you could join us from Israel. It's about 7 p.m. your time. Okay, so we've got a presentation. The way this webinar is going to work is Julia is going to give a bit of a presentation. If you have questions, just click on the Q&A function and then we'll have a conversation toward the end of the program.
So this is the center I'm heading now. And what I'll do in my lecture, I'll present, first of all, some data, some figures on immigration in Israel. Then I will mostly talk about the what is the core understanding that drives us in the center, because you see, it's important to know that it's a research and education on migrants' lives, not on statistics, not on demography, on migrants' lives, and I should add migrants' lives experiences. So please, the next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, I will be talking about the objectives. This is just to give the idea about what will come next. We do documentation, research, and education. I'll explain later what it all means, but the latent might say educational and political agenda is to promote social tolerance in Israel. It's not that we just want to do research. Basically, I think if those of you who saw the beautiful presentation before we started on Ben-Gurion, very little is done there just purely, for the sake of knowledge. We love, we're researchers, we want to find out the truth, but we are very devoted, very committed to implementation, to making our work something that makes a difference in people's lives. So this is the hidden agenda, or maybe not so hidden. Please, the next slide. Okay, in order to understand, I'm sure most of you know some facts about Israel and the fact that we are an immigration country, but when you see the figures, it is quite amazing. The last Independence Day, the population of Israel numbered 9.7 million, of them 7.6 Jews. And if you look at the pie, you see that over 21% are not Israeli born. 21% of the population are not Israeli born. And this is a huge number to a small country. If we look on the immigration history of Israel since the establishment of the state, 3.3 million immigrants arrived in the country. Let me remind you that the initial population of Israel in maybe 1949, the declaration of the state was about 700,000. So the population growth, of course, there's childbirth and everything, but the influx of migration is huge, was huge, and is still very much a phenomenon in Israel. And it affects, I will try to convince you that it affects the lives of immigrants and the lives of locals, okay? And
Julia, just on that last slide real quick, my understanding is around at the time of independence, 600, 700,000 Jews, around the same number of Arabs.
Well, that I don't know, could be
okay,
quite possible.
So yeah. Today you have almost 10 million and about 80% of the population Jewish and 20% of
Right. But I'm not sure the territory is similar, the division of territories. So because in the count of Israeli population, Arabs who live in the occupied territories are not counted.
Right. I think these statistics are basically inside the green line, not including the territories.
Right. Only the green
population line would include the settlements.
Yeah.
Okay. That's amazing. 78% native born.
Yeah, well, you're looking at the other side. It's really amazing. The country, we have a very small country, but 70%. Yeah, you're right.
A lot of new babies since independence.
Right. A very high childbirth rate in Israel. I'm not sure if it's in the world, but okay, so I'll start telling you what we believe in centers. My personal belief, my theoretical understanding based on work, research, on all the years I've been studying migration and work of people that are associated with me, PhD students, colleagues. We have it's not covered, it's ability to believe that the voices of immigrants in the Israeli society are silenced. What do you mean silence? You look at the newspapers, there's not so much about immigration. Yeah, there is a crisis, a scandal, of course, but there's much more about phenomena, and it's not 100%, but there is a similarity to the refugees from the Holocaust kept quiet for years. didn't tell the story. Of course, it's a much more dramatic story, but they were silent, and I know I mean silence only from external,
Julia,
but also from internal. Yeah.
We're having some problems hearing your voice. I don't know if you have some open windows. Maybe you could close them on your computer. If not, you could try to stop.
Windows.
You could try to stop. There you go. Now we hear you clearly.
Okay, let me see. I'll close everything.
You sound good right now.
It's okay.
Perfect.
So it must have been the PowerPoint. So what do we believe that the voices means the experiences, the grievances, the achievements, everything has to do with migrants. They are not the core discourse in the Israeli society as it should be, because there's so many immigrants. And one of the main reasons is the silence, you can go on to the next slide, keep talking, is because migration may be a traumatic experience. That's not necessarily it is, but it may be, because it's such a huge and total life change. It's a change of environment, of language, of climate, of whatever. So when there is a traumatic experience, it's very hard to work it through, and sometimes it's silence. There is also maybe a traumatic experience for the receiving population, because there's pressures that are added to the everyday life. Like at the time in the 90s, there was an influence of huge mass of immigrants from the former Soviet Union. Many kids came to school, and a friend of mine told me that her daughter went to start school. She went to grade 1, very excited about going, happy and everything. On the second day, on the third day, she comes and she says, I don't want to go to school anymore. What happened? You were so excited, I wanted so much. I'm sick and tired of those Russian kids. On Sunday, Sasha came and the teacher started explaining everything that she explained to us before. On the second day, Masha came and she started explaining it again. On the third day, I don't know, Misha came and she started explaining it again. I don't want to do. Yeah, so this is a very naive, I think, beautiful example of what it does to the local population when there's a constant influx of new immigrants. On the more economic level, there's a competition for assets, education. There's upward mobility of the middle class that happened before the immigration. All of a sudden, people, before the Russian immigration, people went to high school, professional school, started getting professional jobs. All of a sudden, there came huge mass of Soviet immigrants who had higher education, but they would compromise for any job. So they would take the jobs, although they were overqualified, they took the jobs of people who previously hoped to proceed and make their careers, and they would accept lower fees, lower pay. So this is something that is really threatening. And of course, the threat to familiar culture and way of life, we all are used to doing things a certain way, planning a certain way, raising your children a certain way. And usually we live in an environment where, looking for an environment where people are like us. So we kind of get to bring the feedback that we are okay, you're raising your kids okay, because 5 of my girlfriends raised my children the same way. All of a sudden, there come different people and they raise the children in a different way, and the kids seem to be successful. So the question is, what's wrong with me? Maybe we're doing something wrong. It's an impossible reflection to make. Usually we'd say, okay, forget about it, they're primitive or they're obsessed or whatever, and what I do is the best. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. So those are just examples of how threatening the immigration may be for the immigrants and for the receiving society. And as human beings who want to be, we protect our well-being, unconscious processes help us avoid and forget and deny things that distress us. So immigrants would, one way would be to try to become Israeli. This is usually done by adolescents. They are rushing to become Israeli, forget their mother tongue, don't want to do anything with the host previous culture, and they become, it's fake Israelis because it's not content. It's like it's a disguise. They're going in order to fit, in order to be like everybody else. And the other mechanism is setting yourself apart. Like we use. I've heard that this was funny. It's from immigrants from the Soviet Union in the United States. Some people told me they got a letter from immigrants who moved from, I don't remember, Moscow to Brighton Beach. And they have a wonderful Russian-speaking community, and their stores and the foods, Russian foods, and the theater they've established, and the community center, everything's Russian, wonderful. And to America, we don't go. Brighton Beach is something different. To America, we don't go. So this is a protective measure, to feel okay, to feel that you are surrounded by familiar people. It's unconscious, it's protective, it's not all bad, because it makes some space for recovery, for getting into to process this whole experience of the huge change. Next slide, please.
Julia, we're getting a question from David Levine. He said that he's seen statistics that up to 25% of Mizrahi immigrants have been marrying Ashkenazim. He's asking, doesn't that suggest that there's maybe more integration than what you're describing here?
Yeah. Well, I'm talking about a part of the population of the immigrants that do not integrate. I'm not sure it's only 25%. I think there's more because, well, that comes here. Let me just finish the thought and I'll relate to the question. All the things I've described, the denial, the silencing, the attempts to deal with, it's a human attempt to deal with a stressful situation. Consequences are the perpetuation of trauma, of stress, end of the threat, and separation, weakening of individual identity, and of social cohesion, and we see that in the streets. Now, because the discourse, the political discourse, is about Mizrahim and Ashkenazim, which is not real. I'm totally with the question. There's not such thing anymore. We are all mixed up, but politically, it's the advantage of the politicians to create conflict and to talk about the issue of dissent, which is not an issue anymore because most of Israelis are mixed. Most people, there's 25%. The Russians have not done it yet, but they knew. They will also marry into different ethnic groups, but sequence of not resolving and not dealing with the trauma. This is the core issue that troubles me a lot. Really troubles me a lot. My daughter is also a psychologist and she works in hospital. They have a trauma unit for psychological trauma, and they have people who have been in the Yom Kippur War and have been traumatized, and only now they come for treatment. Retirement, you mentioned. They have worked all their lives. They have been shell shock, that's what it's called, it was called before. And they work, they make children, they have families, and they're retired. That's what the whole thing comes back in their face because it hasn't been resolved. It's sitting there boiling quietly, and now it comes back. I mean, and I think similar thing is happening in the society as a whole, because it's very hard to generalize from individual to social level. But yeah, I had a huge fight with a taxi driver yesterday who he didn't agree with me, I didn't agree with him. Okay, so we didn't agree about the Supreme Court. It was quite intelligent. So in the end, like the argument finished, we don't agree. So I said, okay, you are a spoiled and privileged Ashkenazi. Has nothing to do with the beginning, of this opinion and this opinion. It's there. It's there. It's very easy to awaken, although it's not necessarily the demographic reality. And this is something we hope to contribute to resolving.
I do want you to come back to the tension in the streets right now and how the migrant experience has influenced the arguments over judicial reform. But we're getting a really good question from Steve Siegel.
Okay.
He's asking about, does intermarriage among the different immigrant groups help with the assimilation, or is it frowned upon?
No, it's not frowned upon by the society, by the families. We are a very hard people, the Jewish people. My grandmother in Vilna, she was from the Hasidim family. My grandfather in Vilna was from the Snagdim family. They married, and my grandfather set Shiva on her. This is our people. We are horrible in clinging to our identities. For him, she was dead. She went to like Misnagdim. It wasn't even, I'm not a secular Jew, he was religious. Okay, so in terms of families, they do frown on it, but eventually people reconcile and it works. In the society, there's no negative attitude, it's not at all. Okay, but it's there, it's boiling. There's anger in the Mizrahi group that they have been discriminated against, and they have been discriminated against. And the politicians don't have the courage to say, yes, we did that. Why did they do that? It's a different lecture. Just to say it very briefly, if you look at the leadership of Israel in the beginning, Ben-Gurion, except maybe Chaim Weizmann, none of them came from a very democratic and tolerant country, to put it mildly. So they were not tolerant, they were not accepting, but they built the country. So that's a difference.
We're getting some really good questions that are coming in. One's from Goldie Lansky, and she's asking a little bit about the Holocaust survivors' impact on the second generation.
I'm not sure what's the question. The second generation Holocaust survivors?
The second generation from Holocaust survivors, and maybe that also has to do with the immigration, but does the second generation, and you were just speaking about it.
Well, I'm speaking about the second generation of immigrants as well, but when you look at the Holocaust survivors, of course there was immigration there, but the trauma of Holocaust was so much heavier that it's almost marginal. The drama of migration, not such a big deal, because the main trauma is the one of the Holocaust. And second generation, we're talking now about the third generation of the Holocaust survivors. And it's an issue that came to the social discourse, but it wasn't really open till Eichmann's trial. They didn't speak about it at all. Now there's much more, and people, as they get older, the survivors themselves, they realize that this is their last chance to tell the story, and starting to share much more. So the second generation, what's interesting, for example, the Russian immigrants from the Soviet Union, because there was no such understanding there about Holocaust, there was no Holocaust, but Russian citizens were killed. Only, I think, in 80s, the blacks say Jewish people, and still it's not clear that it's Jewish people. So they often said, wow, I'm second generation, I didn't know that. It explains a lot to them because there was no such awareness of the fact that they are second generation. Okay?
We're getting a question from an anonymous attendee that's asking about Middle Eastern Jewish immigrants from Arab countries. Do they socialize with the non-Jewish Israeli Arabs, whom they might share more cultural similarities?
Well, the tragic thing we talk about, I'm not sure that you know much, is that it could have been the bridge for the state of Israel with the local Arab population, and they didn't want to socialize with them at all. Although there's a difference, there's let's say in Morocco, the relationships were very good with Muslim neighbors, but in other countries wasn't the case. So I think they didn't know. Their group of reference is the Jewish Israeli population, not the Arab population. We don't socialize with them, not anymore. Yeah.
Okay. We're also getting questions and comments from Dr. Yitzhak Kerem. He's asking about what do we know in terms of the political leaning from the different migrant groups?
It's hard to tell. I'm, having been on the streets for 22 weeks now, every Saturday. So like people go to shul, I go to demonstration. I do hear a lot of Spanish, Argentinian immigrants are there, Americans, of course. I live in Ranana, so there are the Americans and South African Jews. And I have some French, not much, but I don't hear much Russian in the streets. So this is my personal take. I think the voting, there were some research on, but before this whole thing started, on voting patterns, and the general data was that as time goes by, immigrants' voting patterns become similar to those of locals. But yeah, on the street, I don't hear much Russian. Okay, so here are the objectives on the center, keeping in mind that what we want to promote is tolerance and cohesion. The first step is to document migrants' narratives. We interview immigrants, we encourage our students to interview immigrants, and we base research on, thank God, there's narrative approaches now, and we can do research on that. The other aspect is research. Again, research not on the demography of immigrants or motivation, which is very important, but on experiences. And it's very interesting because I have a book, there's 2 stories there, immigrant girls, both of them were 12 when they came to Israel. One came from Morocco, from Marrakesh, and the other came from Iraq, I think. And they were the same place. And for one, it was a wonderful experience, and for the other, it was a disaster. So the experiences are not only affected by the external realities, they're also affected by the internal factors, and it's very important to learn how people respond to different conditions. The education is, again, major factor in our center because we come from social work, psychology, education, and it is imperative, and it's not so focused as it should be, that people need to know about immigration, about immigrants. And I work with social workers who work with, in the south near Ben-Gurion, there's a large concentration of jails. Jails. And social workers work with people who are in the jails. And I talked to them, do you know who is an immigrant? Yes, you will know 50% are immigrants. Okay, great. When you work with a person who's an immigrant, you talk about his immigration. No, I talk about his crime, about how he's going to be rehabilitated. How can he be rehabilitated if you like cutting an arm and he will have to go around without an arm to be rehabilitated? It's not so obvious and it should be able to. Next slide, please. I'm okay in time or with first or what? Okay, that's the documentation. We have a collection of 19, now maybe more, video interviews with migrants, refugees. You see, we have an Arab chief who's being interviewed. He was a refugee in 48. And this guy is a sculptor. He's the one on the bottom is a sculptor from Ethiopia. And those interviews are, first of all, it's wonderful that they are there and collected, and they are available, accessible to everybody, students, non-students, and we encourage people, students and non-students, to listen to them, to talk about them, to study them. Next slide, please. Those are the research activities. I won't bore you with everything. On the left-hand side, there's our publication, some of our publication. On the right-hand side, I'll just point to the second seminar we had this year. It's on personal history and migration research. We address the issue of why and how my personal history brought me and brings me to become a migration researcher. This is very seldom discussed. Why migration? What's my investment? Why is it meaningful? What do I want to achieve? Next slide, please. Okay, now education is something we did. I'll give you one example. We are trying to make a larger impact, and one activity we did was an exhibit we made at the Ben-Gurion University, later at the Hebrew University, and the exhibit was Objects in Transition. We approached university staff, academic staff, and administrative staff, whoever was willing, who were not born in Israel, and we told them, are you willing for us to have the photograph and to bring to this session an object that is important to you in terms of your migration. Next slide, please. One of the interviewees, next slide. Okay. One of the interviewees was Professor David Laser from the Department of Psychology. He was born in Belgium, and his object was, as you see, ice cream. We had a wonderful photographer. They wasted about 2 kilos of ice cream because it melted. Photography session is a long one. But it was important for him that ice cream is the issue for him as an important object of migration. And he says, when I moved to Israel, I immediately felt a sense of freedom. It turned out that here you can just go down the street and get an ice cream. I felt like I arrived in a place that is mine. Although it's just a trivial matter, it was a powerful emotional experience. In Antwerp, I could not buy kosher ice cream in the street. Coffee shops were also off limits, and you could get into trouble with drunken anti-Semites there, or anti-Semites who were not drunk. Okay, so here's the object that is significant in terms of migration. We had an exhibition of 12 staff members, and everybody loved it. Next, please. Next slide. Okay, so the last project, I think you mentioned it, was the international project on devising modern approaches to teaching. Modern, it's mostly experiential, again, focusing on the experience, interviews, artwork, whatever. And we developed with 4 universities in Europe and 6 academic institutions in Israel, courses for applied professionals, teachers, counselors, social workers, psychologists, medical that focus on the experience, where the students will tell their experiences. Please, next slide. The 19 courses, or some of it has been developed together in the Israeli institutions. One is in Sakhin College, which is a non college, and it's the first time in the Arab academic institution they address the issue of being refugees. Students went to interview their grandfathers who told them about being a refugee. It's the first time because it's such a sensitive issue. All don't know how to talk about it. Of course, other colleges, you see, we have dialogues between different groups with family issues, all kinds of issues, and it's been 2 years ago, and half of the courses are still on. Our future plans are very modest. The one burning issue is the war in Ukraine, which brought to Israel many academicians and social sciences researchers who are trying to integrate. We offer short-term fellowship for these researchers, but we are hoping to develop a longer-term program to help them find collaborations, to find grants, and assist them to integrate into the academic.
I believe right now we have.
System.
I was told we have 40 students, Russian-speaking students who have fled from Ukraine and also from Russia that are BGU, and next year the numbers are going up to 80.
Right, but those are the ones that are enrolled in formal programs. There's about 200 more who are not enrolled. We kind of collected them. We have a network, and they are not enrolled. Some of them may have gotten grants, but it's short term. It's not on the last. So this is a very important thing. We're planning to start looking for funds for this. This is important because you get first-rate researchers from major universities, and it's a pity not to integrate and lose the assets they bring with them. So it's for the good of everybody. The other plan we have is to become sort of a task force for other schools, other universities, to export our knowledge by modules of about the immigrants' life, come to schools. We hope to get down to the kindergartens, but it's a long term. Go and suggest that we do a class, 2 classes, a workshop, whatever, on the lives of immigrants in all the departments of BGU and other universities, so that there is awareness, and we're trying to get funds for that. We hope to, we did in the past, give out scholarships and prizes for theses on immigrants' lives, and we'll plan to keep the seminars and the publication schedule we have had so far. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. All right, that was really informative. Israel is such a melting pot and complicated country. Those that don't like Israel want to simplify as if it's a homogeneous society, but it's so complicated.
Very.
Thank you very much. So please, for those of you who are interested, our annual meeting is coming up in October in New York City. I think October 22nd to the 24th. We have some really interesting program that we'll be doing in the New York tri-state area, targeted for the whole community, not just our board members. So more information will be coming out on that soon. And also, if you want to get involved, just go to our website. We love to get involved. We have chapters in different various formation across the country. So depending on where you are, you can reach out. You can always text me or email, or just go to the website and hit contact information, and we'll get your information. Love to get you involved however you would like. David Ben-Gurion, the founder, first prime minister, and namesake of our university, who I lovingly refer to as the #2 Jew all time, once said,
who's number 1?
Yeah, I got to give that to Moses. But you can debate, you could come up with somebody else. Some people say Abraham is the first Jew. Well, we'll give Moses number one, but this is about the number two, David Ben-Gurion. He said that we need Jews from America, Rhodesia, Iraq, Russia, anywhere they are. We want them to come to the desert, the Negev desert, and make it different from anything known on earth, fitted to the environment and an inspiration to people everywhere. And that's really the work of Ben-Gurion University of the Negev, to be a migdalor, a beacon of light that emanates from the Negev desert and adds value through education and science to Israel, obviously, but also to the world, by making the world just a better place through the sharing of the knowledge that we learn. And thank you, Julia, for your work and for your long and esteemed career. And please enjoy retirement, but don't forget to answer our phone call when we call you to bring you back. Everybody stay safe and have a great week. Thank you very much.
Thank you.